May 31st, 1995, Havana, Cuba. In a dim villa, Robert Vesco sits waiting. He's 59, gaunt and paranoid. For 23 years, he's been the world's most famous fugitive, hidden by the Castro regime. But today, the silence in the room feels heavy. He knows his time has finally run out. Outside, it's not the FBI knocking. It's the Cuban military. Special forces have locked down the block. Vesco spent decades running from America, thinking this island was his safe house. But in the world of high-stakes crime, protection is just a rental agreement, and the landlord is here to evict him. Heavy boots hit the porch. That's the sound of reality crashing in. Vesco used his millions to build a wall between himself and the law. He bribed presidents and charmed dictators. But when the Ministry of Interior kicks down your door, no amount of money can stop what's coming next. Why was he so important? Because he was a walking bank. When he fled the U.S., he didn't just run, he looted. $224 million in cash and liquid assets. That's over $1.6 billion today, stashed in briefcases and Swiss accounts. If you steal 1,000, you're a thief. Vesco stole 1 billion, so he was a king. This is the collapse. The agents aren't asking nicely. The charge? Illicit economic activity. He tried to run a scam on the Cuban government itself. The arrogance is unmatched. As they handcuff him, look at his face. That's the realization that all the money in the world can't buy you out of a Cuban prison.
As always, before we start, I need you not to believe everything around you. For those seeing me for the first time, I am Quavo, and I talk about everything strange and mysterious on planet Earth.
Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so we don't get lost in the sea of the internet. Let's rewind. The victim was iOS, a massive company run by Bernie Kornfeld. Bernie was the Donald Trump of the 60s, loud, flashy, partying in castles. He convinced factory workers and dentists to give him $2.5 billion, promising them endless wealth. But it was all hype, a bubble waiting to burst. And burst it did. When the market dipped, panic set in. Thousands of investors rushed the doors, demanding their life savings back. iOS was bleeding out. The board kicked Kornfeld out and looked for a savior. Instead, they found a wolf in a tailored suit named Robert Vesco. Enter Vesco, a 35-year-old dropout who talked like a genius. He marched into that Swiss boardroom and convinced everyone, even the U.S. government, that he could save the company. They handed him the keys to the kingdom, but he wasn't there to save the ship. He was there to strip it for parts. With one signature, the crime of the century began. Vesco took control of the vaults. He didn't invest the money, he moved it. He transferred millions into shell companies only he controlled, treating the treasury like his personal piggy bank. That pen stroke wiped out the savings of thousands of families. He called it Project LPI. Insiders say it stood for Looting, Plundering, Inc. Seriously, he systematically dismantled the company's safeguards, moving cash from New York to shadow banks in the Bahamas. By the time regulators looked up, the folder was empty and the money was gone. Vesco was a bureaucrat of theft. He buried the crime in mountains of confusing paperwork and complex transfers. He cooked the books so thoroughly that liquidators spent decades trying to unravel it. He weaponized complexity, betting that he'd be long gone before anyone figured out the math. He spent the loot on the Silver Phyllis, a Boeing 707 turned into a flying disco. Sauna, dance floor, boardroom. Vesco cruised at 40,000 feet, drinking champagne paid for by the working class. He lived in a distortion field where consequences didn't exist, only altitude and luxury. But you can't hide $250 million forever. In 1972, the SEC woke up. Headlines screamed fraud. The U.S. government realized they'd been played. Vesco was now public enemy number one. But he wasn't planning on jail. He had one card left, the biggest bride in American history. Vesco needed the investigation to stop. A normal crook hires a lawyer. Vesco decided to buy the boss. He targeted President Richard Nixon. He figured if he funded Nixon's re-election campaign, the Justice Department would look the other way. It was a massive gamble. It played out like a noir film. A rainy night in D.C. Vesco's bagman handed a briefcase with $200,000 in cash to Nixon's finance chairman. It wasn't a donation, it was a purchase order. Take the cash, kill the investigation. He was trying to bribe the White House. Nixon was terrified. We know from tapes that the administration feared this connection coming out. Vesco had his hooks deep into the president's family, using Nixon's brother as a pawn. Nixon hesitated, caught between the money and the law, and in that hesitation, Vesco's plan crumbled. Vesco didn't ask nicely. He threatened. He let the White House know that if he went down, he'd take them with him. This is the dark side of power, leverage. He thought he owned them, but he underestimated a little thing called Watergate that was about to blow up. When the Watergate burglars were arrested, investigators traced the cash in their pockets. Guess what? It was money laundered through Vesco's channels. The investigation into Nixon's slush funds blew the lid off Vesco's bribe. His secret donation was now front-page news. The feds raided the offices and found the connection. Vesco was charged with obstruction of justice and bribery. His plan to buy immunity backfired spectacularly. Instead of making the case disappear, he made himself the most famous fugitive in the world. It was time to run. 1973. Vesco flees. He boards his jet and vanishes into the night, just steps ahead of the warrant. He leaves his life behind, but takes the money. He's now a globe-trotting fugitive, banned from the U.S., looking for a government that is for sale. He got creative. He tried to buy an island in the Caribbean to start his own country, New Aragon. Passports, UN seat, immunity. He nearly pulled it off, wanting to be the prince of thieves. But the U.S. pressured Britain to kill the deal. The kingdom died on the table. So he settled for Costa Rica. This was his golden era. He befriended President Jose Figueres. He invested millions into the local economy. He built a compound that was a fortress. In return, the president passed a law blocking extradition. Vesco and the president would sit on the porch, drinking rum, laughing at the Americans. Vesco proved that in the right latitude, justice is just a suggestion. He was the unofficial king of Costa Rica, buying legitimacy with stolen loot. For a while, he was untouchable. He walked the streets of San Jose like a celebrity. He gave TV interviews. He donated to charities. He built an image as a persecuted businessman, a victim of American imperialism. The locals loved him because he spread the cash around. The FBI agents would fly down, watch him from a distance, and fly back empty-handed. It was the ultimate power move, living in the open, protected by the flag of a sovereign nation. But politics changed. A new government came to power in Costa Rica, and they wanted Vesco out. He had to flee again. This time he took to the sea. He lived on his yacht, the Patricia, floating in international waters. He became a pirate king, bouncing between islands in the Caribbean, never staying too long in one port. Antigua, Bahamas, Nicaragua. He was adrift, a rich man with nowhere to land. The net was tightening, and his options were running out.
Desperate times call for desperate allies. In the Bahamas, Vesco connected with Carlos later. You know the name, the wild man of the Medellin cartel. Later owned Norman's Cay and used it to fly cocaine into Florida. Vesco, the logistical genius, allegedly helped them organize their flight paths and money laundering. He traded his suit for a smuggler's shirt. He was now swimming with the sharks, facilitating the drug trade to pay for his protection. He had gone from white-collar fraud to narco-trafficking. Back in the U.S., the Watergate verdicts came down. Nixon resigned in disgrace. The men Vesco tried to bribe went to prison. The world was changing. The U.S. government was becoming more aggressive against financial criminals and drug traffickers. Vesco saw the writing on the wall. The Bahamas was getting too hot. The DEA was closing in on later. Vesco needed a new rock to hide under, a place where American law enforcement dared not go. He went to Nicaragua for a bit, hiding out with the Sandinistas. But his cash pile was shrinking. Being a fugitive is expensive. The bribes, the fuel, the security, the yachts, it burns through millions. Vesco was stressed. He was sitting in rundown rooms, counting stacks of cash that were getting smaller every day. He wasn't the billionaire genius anymore. He was an aging crook looking for a retirement home. He needed the ultimate enemy of America to save him. 1983. He makes his final move. He flies to Havana. Fidel Castro, the bearded revolutionary, the thorn in America's side. Castro hated the U.S. government, so he welcomed Vesco, not out of friendship, but out of spite. He let Vesco live in Havana, gave him a villa, and shielded him from the FBI. Vesco became a ghost again, living under the protection of the communist regime. He told the CIA he had secrets to trade, playing both sides, surviving on his wits. But life in Cuba wasn't a party. It was a golden cage. Vesco was bored. He couldn't leave the island. He couldn't spend his money freely. He was a prisoner of his own safety. He spent his days in his garden, swinging in a hammock, watching the paint peel on his villa. He got fat. He got sloppy. And worst of all, he got greedy again. He forgot that Fidel Castro wasn't a politician you could bribe. He was a dictator you had to obey. Vesco couldn't help himself. He started a new hustle. He claimed he had found a miracle drug called TX, a cure for cancer, AIDS, even the common cold. He brought in investors, promised massive returns, and even involved the Cuban state biotech labs. He was running a Ponzi scheme right under Castro's nose. He was cheating the very government that was protecting him. It was the stupidest move of his life. He thought he was smarter than everyone, even Fidel. When Castro found out, he was furious. This wasn't just crime, it was an insult.
It was embarrassment. The intelligence reports hit his desk, detailing how Vesco was stealing from the Cuban state. Castro slammed his fist down. The protection was over. He ordered the arrest. He decided to show the world that Cuba doesn't harbor thieves who steal from the revolution. The order went out. Bring him in.
And that brings us back to the start. The jeep, the soldiers, the arrest. Vesco walked down those steps in handcuffs, leaving behind his life of luxury forever. He was sentenced to 13 years. The U.S. demanded extradition, but Castro refused. He said, "Vesco sinned against us. He pays here." It was the ultimate justice. The man who ran from American prisons ended up rotting in a Cuban one, with no air conditioning, no room service, and no way out. Vesco spent his final years in a concrete cell. The man who owned the silver Phyllis, who owned islands, who bought presidents, was reduced to a metal cot and a shaft of sunlight. He got sick, lung cancer. He wasted away in the dark, forgotten by the world he once scammed. The millions he stole couldn't buy him an aspirin in there. It's a lonely end for the man who stole the world. Robert Vesco died in 2007. There was no state funeral, no headlines. They buried him in Colón's cemetery in Havana, in a grave with a simple marker. We don't even know for sure if he's in there. Some say he faked his death one last time, but that's just a myth. The reality is simpler. The house always wins. Vesco played a high-stakes game for 30 years, but in the end, he cashed out with nothing but dirt. I'm Quavo, and that is the story of the man who flew too close to the sun. Don't forget to subscribe. Stay curious.
Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so we don't get lost in the sea of the internet.